I'd only just checked into my hotel and was ready to crash when my phone buzzed. It was my boss calling with a last-minute demand. She needed me back at the office by 8 a.m. There were no exceptions. I let out a sigh, realizing I had to book a flight, pack, and hustle to the airport. It was too late to call Kathy without waking up the kids, so I thought it would be easier to just head home, grab what I needed, and head out again. The house was dark, save for the soft glow coming from our bedroom. As I moved quietly through the entryway, I heard voices, Kathy and a man. My heart sank. The kids were probably staying with her sister. My gut twisted as I pieced it together. Kathy was having an affair. My granddad's old advice ran through my mind. Keep calm, don't act in anger. I took a few deep breaths, knowing my temper could flare just like my granddad's. He had warned me it could ruin everything. If I ever lost control, I decided against the confrontation, at least for now. I needed proof. I pulled out the new smartphone my employer had issued me. It had a crystal clear camera, plus a mic and a battery-saving flash drive. I began recording, seeing Kathy within the frame. It was painful, but I pushed down the hurt. I'd deal with this calmly. I also planned to get DNA tests for the kids. If she was capable of this, who knew what else she'd lied about while recording? I overheard something that made me snap. I couldn't hold back any longer. I burst into the room, tackled a man whose name I later learned was Tom, and fought him until I chased him out of the house. Kathy was cowering in a corner, looking I was completely stunned. "Get over here," I said, in a firm voice. It felt surreal, like I was watching the scene unfold from outside myself. Every time my temper took over, I'd almost black out, barely remembering what happened afterwards. This was only the fourth time I'd hit that level. "Get over here," I repeated, and she crawled close, fear written all over her face. Her face was pale, and her eyes were wide with fear as she said, "I'm so sorry, Arthur. I'm so sorry." I could feel my anger rising. "Kathy, don't bother with the apologies. I want you to regret those times with Tom. I want you to regret them a lot." She was shaking her eyes wide with fear. She opened and closed her mouth, too scared to answer. "Please," she stammered. "Don't hurt me. I'm sorry. I'm so sorry. You've disgraced this house, our bedroom, our bed." I spat, my voice dripping with disgust. "You've betrayed not only me but also our children." She paled visibly, shaking. I felt the rage inside me. "Calm down," I said, as if the storm inside was finally easing. "You'll pack your things and be out of here by noon." I pointed to the bed and said, "Take everything in here, especially the bed. Leave my stuff on the floor. Show me some respect." "What's mine?" she asked, her voice barely a whisper. "How am I supposed to do all this?" "Figure it out. Maybe call those brothers of yours I lent money to." I left the room, grumbling. I grabbed my bags and threw them into my car, taking a quick glance around. Tom had disappeared. Thankfully, I caught a glimpse of myself in the mirror as I climbed into the driver's seat. My nose was broken and my shirt was blood-stained, which was an interesting touch to my otherwise exhausted appearance. I ignored the pain and drove to the nearest hospital. The doctor's assessment wasn't pretty: broken nose, a couple of cracked ribs, possible concussion, and a smattering of bruises. They wanted to admit me to hospital, but I refused. I had work to get back to, and besides, I'd be fine when the police arrived. I downplayed the incident, saying I'd been attacked but didn't remember much, just that I'd come out the worst. Tom wasn't in the ER, so I figured he'd walked away. I went straight to my boss, Rachel Parker. The VP's office had a private bathroom, so I washed up there, hoping to get my head straight before the day began. When I stepped out, I saw Kathy's brother waiting in the lobby. He looked just as bad as I felt. I took a moment to gather myself, then stepped into Rachel's office to give her a rundown. She listened quietly, and when I finished, she said, "I know a good divorce lawyer. Fiona, a college friend, will help you out." After a quick call to Fiona, Rachel turned back to me and said, "Now what happened? Let's just say I came home and got an unwelcome surprise. Do you know anyone else who might help me handle all this?" When I finished, Rachel said, "I know a good divorce lawyer. Fiona, who's a college friend of mine, will help you out." After a quick call to Fiona, she turned back to me and said, "What happened? Let's just say I came home and got an unwelcome surprise. Do you know anyone else who might be able to help me handle all this?" I nodded, and she smiled. Rachel was good like that. She's really supportive and grounded, even when things get tough. She handled the work that morning, while I sat next to her giving the details to Fiona so I wouldn't have to keep repeating myself for the next hour. I worked with Rachel to fix some mess my brothers had left behind in the company. Rachel and I could have doubled this place's success if it weren't for them. Fiona arrived right on time, and I told her the story. I left out anything about my temper, though. I just said that I blacked out in rage and then showed her and Rachel the video. Tom asked Kathy if she loved me more than her kids. Kathy's response was pretty cold. She said, "I'm yours. I don't care about them." Fiona and Rachel looked at me, clearly taken aback. "Fiona, I want full custody," I said firmly. "Even if I have to give up a large chunk of assets, I don't want to pay child support." "If it means she's in control," I added. "My kids are with their grandparents right now, and I need to go get them." "Arthur," Fiona replied, "I'll fight for you. But even with this recording, full custody it'll be tough. But I'll fight for you." Fiona then pulled out a few forms. "I'll draft some preliminary documents, give Kathy my card, and have her lawyer reach out to me and Arthur," she added, looking serious. "Stay calm, don't let your anger get the better of you," she said, nodding at me. "I will," I replied, feeling a bit ashamed. "Thanks, Fiona. I'll stay level-headed." Fiona and Rachel had a quick chat, then Fiona left. I went back to work, but I was really tense. I realized I was getting really angry about Kathy moving out. Part of me wanted to tell her to stay, but the other part wanted her gone fast. Rachel said, glancing at the time, "I need to take care of something personal. It shouldn't take more than an hour or two. I'll be back as soon as I can." Rachel replied with a smile, "I'm here to help. Just don't be gone too long." I hurried to my car, hoping to keep that anger in check. When I arrived home, I saw a rental truck in the driveway. Kathy's brothers was hauling out the mattress. 2 police cars were also parked there with 3 officers watching the scene. I grabbed my laptop and approached the officers cautiously. "I have a recording that might help explain everything that went down last night," I said. "May I show it to you?" The woman looked me up and down. "Are you Arthur Lane, Captain's husband?" "Yes, Sergeant. I'll answer any questions you have, but please take a look at this recording first." The sergeant nodded, but I could tell she was ready to restrain me at any moment. "Okay, Mr. Lane, we'll watch it, but stay right here. You have my word." I started the video and turned the volume up so everyone nearby could hear the part where Kathy said she didn't. I asked her if she cared about the kids playing. She fumbled with the box she was carrying, and her face paled while she scrambled to pick up her things. I noticed a small bag of white powder fall out of one of the boxes. I said, "Sergeant, you might want to check that out." She caught sight of it too and immediately called for backup, sprinting toward Kathy. I remembered a detail from the recording and zoomed in on a mirror on the bedside table. I showed it to another officer, who called the sergeant over. The sergeant quickly handcuffed Kathy, who started to cry. Her brothers watched in stunned silence. "Sergeant, what's going on?" I asked, trying to process everything. "Your wife's under arrest for possession of a controlled substance. We'll confirm it through tests, but it looks like she's been using it." "Sergeant, what about my kids? When can I get them?" I asked. My concern was growing. "Where are they?" she asked, her tone softening. "They're at her parents' place about 5 miles from here." The sergeant looked at me thoughtfully. "If I were you, I'd go get them right away. Your wife's in custody, so you have the right." I felt both relief and worry flooding in. Of course, I needed to pick them up, but I didn't want any issues in front of the kids. The sergeant nodded. "I'll stay until the movers finish and then follow you to your in-law's house. We'll make sure it's handled smoothly at Law's house, but I'll need a full statement about your injuries." I explained that I came home and found Kathy with Tom Gran. I recorded it, and when Kathy said that awful thing about our kids, I just lost it. The next thing I knew, I was telling her to leave by noon. After that, I went straight to the hospital. I'm not even sure how I got hurt, or if I injured Tom. I handed her the hospital documents listing my injuries. She raised an eyebrow. "Anything hurting right now?" "Oddly, no, but I know it'll catch up to me soon enough," I replied, feeling a wave of dizziness. "Hitch, you have remarkable eyes, by the way." She suggested that I take her back to the hospital. Looking concerned, I told her I'd be fine, just exhausted. I'd barely slept for 2 hours. I needed to get my kids and get back to work. Thankfully, we have daycare there, so they'll be taken care of. I explained all that to her. "But I'm coming with you to pick them up," she said firmly. I thanked her as we waited for Kathy's brothers to finish. Once they were done, I locked the house and got into the sergeant's patrol car. On the drive, she offered a bit of advice. "If I were in your shoes, I'd file for temporary custody," she said. "Get a restraining order to keep her away from the house and the kids for now. With her in custody, This is your chance to set things straight. I'll set up a call with Fiona and update her on the situation. Fiona agreed to handle the necessary paperwork by morning. I'd started calling the sergeant by her first name, Rose, and even flirted a little. She gave me a mix of worry and amused glances. "Aren't you a bit too cheerful for a guy going through all this?" she asked. "I'm about to see my kids. I thought I'd be kept away from them for a while. I've got good people looking out for me. Kathy's betrayal hurt, sure, but I'm not going to let it ruin my life. I'm focusing on what matters. In other words, I'm going to take time to enjoy life." "Rose," I replied, winking at her. She shook her head with a slight smile. "I don't know if you're wise, crazy, or just sleep. We were deprived of our usual comforts when we arrived at my in-laws. We arrived at the law's place without incident. Rose informed them that we were taking the kids, and they didn't put up a fight. They never liked me much anyway, and I suspected they knew about Kathy's infidelity. My kids were thrilled to see me, especially when they saw the patrol car. My eldest, Hope, who is 5, was begging to hear the siren, while my youngest, Jack, who is 3, wanted to sit on Rose's lap. Her as Aunt Rose only earned me a playful glare. "Aunt Rose, will you come to our house?" Hope asked her, her little eyes full of excitement. "I can't, sweetie. I'm too busy," Rose replied with a soft smile when Hope asked her to stay for dinner. Curious, I asked, "So, Rose, what hours do you usually work?" 8 to 5, Monday through Friday, she replied, watching me cautiously. "Then you're free for dinner tomorrow at 6:30, right?" I suggested. "Hope you can show Aunt Rose your doll collection." Hope lit up. "That's awesome, Daddy," she exclaimed. Rose looked caught off guard. "Arthur, you wouldn't want to disappoint Hope, would you?" I asked, giving her a hopeful look with a resigned sigh. Rose turned to Hope and asked, "All right, Hope, what should we have for dinner?" "Chicken," Hope decided. Laughing, Rose replied, "I'll bring some ice cream too." She added, "I'll bring ice cream just to keep an eye on you. You're acting differently." Hope and Luke chorused as Rose pulled up to my office building to drop us off. I waved goodbye, grateful for her support as she drove away. I caught a glimpse of her looking contemplative. She seemed a bit conflicted, muttering to herself, "What am I even doing here? Arthur could still be in serious trouble if Tom Grumman presses charges, and yet I can't believe I was actually called to his house." She continued to reflect on this as she drove. She'd admired Arthur Lane for years, seeing him every weekend at the park with his kids. She thought we had some great chats. I had to hide how nervous he made me. Now he's flirting with me. I don't even know why he bothered. I'm not exactly a model. Thankfully, I didn't have to arrest him. I dropped the kids off at daycare and went to Rachel's office. My behavior, especially around Rose, might have been a bit odd. Maybe it was the lack of sleep, or maybe something else. But I didn't feel like grieving my marriage. It was as if the emotional weight had lifted a long time ago. Rachel and I finished up the day's work, and as we were wrapping up, I asked her if I might need tomorrow off. I don't know if I'll be able to keep up with everything or take the day off. "Arthur, call if you need anything, or just get some rest." When we got home, I ordered pizza for dinner. The kids asked about their mom, and I kept it simple, explaining that Mom and Dad had a big argument, but that we both love them because of it. "Mom's going to stay with Grandma and Grandpa for a while." I added, "It's okay, Daddy, as long as you're here with us, so we're happy," Hope said, squeezing me tightly. I realized how many nights they'd likely spent with their grandparents while Kathy was doing whatever she was doing. I felt a surge of anger, but I quickly pushed it aside. That night, I arranged for an emergency manny to come by early. I put a spare key under the doormat just in case I couldn't get up in time. I got up early and moved most of our joint savings into my personal account and canceled the credit cards we shared. I thought about emptying our safe deposit box, since I had the only key, but decided to think it through first. I made sure we all slept in the guest bedroom's double bed, so I could be there if the kids needed anything in the morning. Hope and Luke woke me up saying someone was at the door. Just as my phone buzzed, a woman's voice said, "Mr. Lane, this is Sue from the nanny service." "Thanks for coming," I said. "I'm a bit out of it. The keys are under the mat. Come on in and head upstairs." I told her to go ahead and charge it. I explained the situation, and she said she'd get Hope ready for daycare while keeping an eye on Luke. She was really warm with the kids, which was reassuring. It meant I could finally get some rest later. A messenger arrived from Fiona's office with a temporary custody order and a restraining order against Cy. Fiona called to update me, mentioning Kathy had been served with divorce papers while she was in custody. She said that, given the drug charge and the recording, we had a good chance of getting full custody. While Sue went to pick up Hope from daycare, I went to the bank and transferred our valuables into a new safe deposit box, leaving Kathy's belongings in the old one across the street. I opened a new current account and savings account in my name only, as I was happy for her to get half once the divorce was settled. I didn't want our money being spent on anything illegal, despite finally feeling some of the pain from my injuries. It wasn't as bad as I'd expected. My nose was still sore though, so I grabbed some chicken from the grocery store. I figured I'd cook that for dinner at 5. Sue left, but I asked her to return the next day. Soon after, Rose showed up for dinner, much to the kids' delight. They asked to see Rose's police weapon, and Rose carefully explained how dangerous real weapons were. She kept glancing at me, likely noticing how rough I looked. She seemed concerned. I couldn't resist teasing her a bit, pretending to feel a bit more dizzy than I actually was. She settled on the couch with the kids to watch a children's movie, and I joined them, joking that her presence was reassuring during the second movie. Rose told me how she'd questioned Tom German. She made me swear to keep it between us, apparently. Tom was staying at a hotel in the next town over and was really scared. Rose showed him the recording where he seems to throw himself backward toward me and the camera. She even listed my injuries for comparison, making it clear he'd gotten off lightly. Rose told him she'd be willing to press charges on my behalf. She said she'd represent me, but warned that if I retaliated, he could face serious consequences. It seemed like Tom had no interest in pressing charges against me. I thanked her and said that since I didn't remember much of what happened, I wouldn't pursue anything against him. I did say that I'd probably send a copy of the video to his wife as a parting gift. Rose left around 11. As the days passed, I settled back in bed with the kids. I avoided all contact with Kathy, leaving any communication to my lawyer. My ribs were on the mend within a few weeks, though my nose took longer to heal. Once Kathy had moved out, I took the chance to redo the bedroom just the way I liked it. I painted it, added new crown molding, and put in new curtains. I'd also bought some new curtains and a huge 4-poster bed with matching furniture. It was all dark, solid wood, and it finally felt like my own space. I'd managed to convince Rose to spend several evenings over at my place. I hadn't exactly made a move yet, but I was planning on it once my nose fully healed. That thing was still tender, and I didn't want to mess it up again. Work was going well too. I'd been able to hire Sue whenever I had to stay out of town, which, thanks to Rachel's efforts, was happening less and less. Even my doctor cleared me, and I figured it was time to finally make my intentions clear. One night, Rose and I were watching a movie, and I got up to get us both some ice cream. Instead of sitting back in my chair when I returned, I joined her on the couch a bit closer than usual. We sat there quietly enjoying the ice cream and the movie. After a moment, I put my arm around her and she turned to me with a questioning look. She asked, "What are you up to tonight?" The doctor gave my nose a clean bill of health, so I told her I was ready to make a move. She flushed and glanced away. "Why would you want to kiss me? I'm not exactly beautiful." I gently placed a finger on her lips and said, "Rose, you're perfect to me. You've got this amazing personality." Personality, she has a warm, welcoming quality that I find irresistible. Her eyes are also incredibly attractive. "Can we kiss now?" She started to say something, but I didn't let her finish. I leaned in and we shared a kiss that felt like something I'd been waiting forever for. The night turned out to be unforgettable, even though we didn't make it through the movie. I was surprised when she agreed to see me again the next night. When we met up, Rose seemed more relaxed. She told me she'd only kissed one other guy, and it hadn't gone well. She opened up about her insecurities, but I didn't let her dwell on them. I asked if she'd be free on Saturday night, and she said yes. When Saturday came, I went to her place for dinner. She greeted me at the door, dressed in a dark blouse and pants. I teased her, asking why she always wore dark colors. "What's wrong with a bit of brightness?" I joked. Rose laughed, and I handed her a bouquet of long-stemmed roses and a box of chocolates. She blushed, and I leaned in for a kiss. It had been a while since I'd felt this way. I said, "What's for dinner?" I could tell she was feeling the same way. "Shepherd's pie," she replied. "It's in the oven." I turned off the oven and we shared a passionate evening. Afterward, we collapsed on the couch, savoring the moment. We got to the shepherd's pie and it was a bit overcooked, but we didn't mind. I ate a couple of large pieces along with garlic bread to refuel while Rose, looking as happy as I'd ever seen her, joined me. She seemed almost amazed, smiling as she whispered, "This is my lucky day." Later that night, as we were cozying up on the couch, my phone wouldn't stop buzzing. Rose's neighbor and friend Beth was calling repeatedly when Rose finally picked up. Beth was frantic. "Rose, are you okay? We're all out here, ready to break down the door, but we figured we'd wait since you're a cop." That's what Beth said in a rush. Rose rolled her eyes, glancing at me. "Everything's fine, Beth. I've just got a friend over. I didn't mean to disturb you." "Is it that good?" Beth asked, looking at me with interest. Rose smiled at me. "That's him from outside," she said. We'd heard laughter and cheers. Rose's neighbors had all come over to check on her that night. We kept them entertained. When morning came, I woke early, showered and got dressed. I apologized to Rose as I prepared to head out to pick up my kids. She gave me a sleepy smile and kissed me, promising to see me again soon. I made sure she was okay. I locked her door and headed out, still feeling a bit dazed. As I stepped out, a small group of her neighbors, some with cameras, gave me a round of applause. I felt both amused and embarrassed, so I bowed slightly, which earned a few giggles. They extended their hands like royalty, and I walked past them humming an old tune my grandfather used to sing. Those mornings stayed with me, reminding me that I could find happiness again. I got into a good rhythm and didn't get to spend too many nights with Rose since I was with Hope and Luke. But the times we did have together were great. There were two issues, though. First, Rose kept herself emotionally guarded. We'd get close, but then she'd pull back as if putting up a wall. Second, she only ever wore dark colors, black, gray, sometimes a white blouse. I wanted to shake her and say, "Dress like you're celebrating life, not mourning it." Meanwhile, the divorce was finally moving forward. Fiona had offered Kathy a fair settlement, but they turned it down despite Fiona warning that it was likely the best deal they'd get through the divorce process. I learned that Kathy's infidelity had started 6 months before. I caught her, apparently, and it all began at a party thrown by Dan, my former friend, while I was out of town. Dan had gotten Kathy drunk and involved her in his usual wild antics, which led to a month-long affair of parties and escapades whenever I wasn't around. Eventually, Dan was afraid I'd find out, so he passed her off to Tom, who continued the affair until the night I walked in on them. Kathy had been convicted on the drug charges and had entered rehab. Despite everything, she somehow clung to the notion that I'd forgive her or agree to joint custody. She even asked her therapist to reach out to me. It turned out that she'd been happy to go along with it all, neglecting me and our children while leaving them with her parents when I was away. Her family, who'd always disapproved of me, thought I was too soft on their daughter. They thought I was weak. They'd never see my kids again if I had anything to say about it. The day of the divorce finally arrived in court. We presented. The judge seemed pretty confused by Kathy's behavior and granted the divorce under Fiona's initial terms, though he didn't seem happy about how easily Kathy's side had gotten off. Kathy got half of our joint assets and retirement accounts, but she wasn't included in my company pension. I also had to pay her half the equity in our house. I was awarded full custody of the kids, and Kathy was granted 2 supervised visits per month, each lasting 4 hours. Neither of us would pay child support. I was also required to keep her on my health insurance for 5 years unless she remarried. Fiona had managed to deduct the loans I'd given to Kathy's family from her share of the assets, which left her with roughly $350. Kathy ended up covering her own legal fees and her share of the costs, while Fiona, my attorney, insisted on waiving the fee for me. She said she owed Rachel for all the ways Rachel had helped her over the years, and knew I'd supported Rachel and the company for as long as anyone. I remember Tom Griman left town shortly after the divorce, and his wife filed to end things. Dan, my former friend, moved across town and avoided me at all costs. It was no surprise considering the role he played in my trouble. Not long after my divorce was finalized, Rose decided to end our romantic relationship. She said she didn't see a future between us, but wanted to stay friends. I was a bit disappointed, but I noticed her holding back a couple of weeks later when she mentioned she'd met a local FBI agent. I wished her all the best, but we continued meeting for lunch or the occasional dinner as friends. About a month after Rose and I had split up, I was getting the kids ready for bed when I heard odd noises at the front door. There was a soft scratching and what sounded like whimpering. I thought it was a lost dog, so I opened the door and found Kathy leaning against the screen. She was barefoot and without a coat. It was close to 1 a.m., 10 p.m. morning. She looked really upset. I carefully opened the door, let her in, and noticed she wasn't responding. I was worried, so I decided not to call the police straight away. I thought she needed some warmth, so I ran a hot bath, remembering the temperature she used to like, and gently placed her in it. I even set up the TV with one of her old favorite shows, I Love Lucy, hoping it would soothe her. She'd love that show whenever I made her a strawberry smoothie and some water and took them to her. She looked like she hadn't eaten in days, so I made her a grilled cheese sandwich and chips. She ate everything without saying a word, and I could tell she was afraid I'd send her back out. She stayed in the bath for a good 2 hours, probably worried that if she got out, she'd have nowhere to go. I gave her one of my robes and told her to stand up and put it on. Then I helped her to the guest room, setting her down on the bed with more I Love Lucy DVDs and a bottle of water. "We'll talk in the morning," I told her. Thankfully, it was Saturday, so I didn't have to worry about work. After taking her clothes to the laundromat, I fell asleep wondering what had driven her to this point. The next morning, I decided to surprise her by letting the kids wake her up. I took Luke to the guest room and told them I had a surprise. Their faces lit up and they ran to her, shouting, "Mummy, Mummy!" Kathy's eyes flew open and she hugged them tightly, showering them with kisses and tears as if she hadn't seen them in years. Even though she'd had supervised visits recently, it was bittersweet watching her reunite with them. I knew all we'd been through. The kids eventually settled down, and Kathy offered to make them breakfast. They looked at me with hopeful eyes, and I gave her a nod of approval. After breakfast, while the kids got distracted with their toys and TV, I sat down with Kathy at the kitchen table to talk. "Kathy, you can't stay here forever. I need to know what's going on. If they'd seen you that night with Tom, they'd have been terrified. They kept mocking our relationship, making me believe you were cheating on me whenever you traveled. At some point, I started believing them. Dan dragged me into a world of pills and escapism, and I lost sight of everything that mattered. I've been working with a therapist to understand it all, but I know you probably don't care anymore." I took a deep breath at my parents' place. They took advantage of me. They made me do all the hard work around the house and pressured me to lend them money. 2 days ago, I found out my father had been writing checks from my account, and my brother somehow ended up with my car. I looked at her, feeling a mix of anger and pity. "First, we'll go to the bank, then file a police report. You don't have to press charges, but this might be." Kathy looked defeated. "Arthur, I can't believe I trusted them and betrayed you first. It all feels like a nightmare." I nodded. My voice was firm. "You're still the mother of my children, Kathy. So listen to me now." With only $250,000 left, we went to the police station. I asked to see Detective Rose. Young Rose was surprised to see Kathy and me together, but as we explained the situation, she promised to investigate. Kathy's parents were calling in a panic, but Kathy refused to speak with them. I was firm with them. I'd had enough. All of Kathy's belongings were turned over, including her car. Her parents were forced to repay $25,000 immediately and sign a loan document for the remaining $75,000. Kathy wanted nothing more to do with them after that. "Arthur," she said quietly, "thank you. I know I hurt you deeply and I'm still in therapy, but can I stay here in the guest room? I want to reconnect with our kids." "Kathy," I replied, I have an offer for you, but you might not like it. You caused me a lot of emotional pain. If you stay, you'll have to help around the house and look after the kids. There will be strict rules if we're going to rebuild any trust. Think carefully before agreeing." She flinched but nodded. I advised her to discuss it. "Kathy, I know you're still working through things with your therapist, Arthur. I want you to know that I truly regret what I did. I'm not sure I can trust you yet, but I'm willing to give it a try. There will be video surveillance around the house, so it's important to me that you're ready to agree to this." Despite her therapist's reservations, Kathy accepted. We agreed. She continued therapy, and I set up a separate room for her. She went back on birth control, bought clothes that suited a fresh start, and helped around the house. I paid her a small salary for her efforts, which the kids seemed to enjoy. We found a balance, but I kept things strictly platonic. I told Rachel what was going on. She was more worried about me than C, thinking that the chaos would stop me from finding real happiness. She told me not to get caught up in this, and I told her I wasn't planning on getting back into a complicated relationship. I even mentioned a woman I was interested in who wasn't currently available, but that I was hopeful for the future. Rachel seemed relieved and happy to see that I wasn't dwelling on the past. I also noticed a few changes at the office after my divorce. I worked closely with Rachel to secure additional shares in our company. Parker and her brothers inherited it, and each held a 25% stake with another 25% sold to public shareholders over the years. Rachel bought back shares, raising her stake to over 35%, while her brother's shares dwindled to below 20%. My job was to help her secure an additional 16% of the vote, enough to push her older brother out as CEO. I got the employees and shareholders on side, especially the women who control the large portion of the shares. It wasn't long before the transition was complete, and Rachel's brother quietly retired. Rachel gave me a big thank you by giving me some nice bonuses and a promotion. I didn't quite make it to president, though. A good manager took that role, and I was offered the position of vice president. Rachel invited me out to dinner at a local Marston hotel with the best prime rib in town to celebrate. We had a glass of wine while we were eating. She looked at me with genuine warmth and said, "Arthur, we did it. I couldn't have asked for a better partner through all this." She was really happy. Then she said, "I know you'll be a huge success." She was also happy about that. But when she offered me the vice president role, I shook my head. I'm really sorry, Rachel, but I can't accept it." Her eyes widened, and I saw the color drain from her face. "But Arthur, why?" she stammered. "There's someone I'm interested in, and to be with her I'll need to step away from the company. Our policy doesn't allow that." I told her I was interested in a relationship with a colleague, hoping she'd understand. She paused, looking both relieved and conflicted. "You mean another Parker employee?" she said. Her voice was tinged with curiosity. "Arthur, I can change those rules if it means keeping you here." "I'm not losing you," she said 2 weeks earlier. I'd already distanced myself from Kathy, and she seemed more relieved than upset. I had a full physical, and I'm ready to pursue a new relationship now. I felt ready to tell Rachel exactly how I felt, but she seemed just as anxious. She was holding my hand. Her expression was full of emotion. I finally spoke up. "Rachel, would you like to dance?" I'd chosen the Marston for its prime rib and had everything arranged so we could have this moment together. I could see she was taken ab, but she didn't resist as I gently helped her up. "Arthur, I'm much older than you," I whispered, blushing slightly, and leaned in to speak softly. "You're the one I want. Just dance with me." We danced through 4 songs, and I could tell neither of us wanted the evening to end. The food had grown cold, but I didn't care. "They have room service here, but we'd need a room," I teased. Holding up the keycard, Rachel blushed as I leaned in and kissed her, sealing the night. The next few days were a whirlwind of emotion. Rachel admitted she'd always have feelings for me, but thought our age difference and her position would keep us apart. Now that everything was out in the open, she was ecstatic. When Monday came around, I was pretty excited too. Rachel called an emergency board meeting with the president to announce that I'd resigned to pursue a romantic relationship within the company. The board, a group of mostly female executives who adored me, were both shocked and delighted. Rachel proposed a change in policy, and everyone agreed unanimously to keep me on board, restoring my position. Mary, the newly appointed president, looked at Rachel with raised eyebrows. "Rachel, you didn't mention who this mystery woman is. If anyone knows, it'll be you, so who's the lucky lady?" Rachel blushed, and after she said quietly, "It's me." The entire board cheered, thrilled by the unexpected announcement. For the next 3 months, Rachel and I were inseparable. We met as often as we could. She joked that I was wearing her out with my energy, but she was determined to keep up since my marriage had fallen apart. I'd felt a renewed passion, and Rachel met me with her own enthusiasm. Our relationship was filled with laughter and joy. We soon started discussing marriage. Then one day she shared some unexpected news. A pregnancy test had come back positive. I was nervous but overjoyed. I immediately proposed, and in just a few weeks, we'd arranged a beautiful, intimate wedding at the Marston. Hope was our flower girl, Luke our ring bearer, with Fiona as Rachel's bridesmaid, and Rose by my side as my friend. Even the judge for my divorce came, joking that he never wanted to see us in court again after the ceremony. Rachel and we moved into the family estate she'd bought from her brother, which became our new home. She even let Kathy stay in a separate area so Hope and Luke could be close to their mother. Kathy continued as a nanny and housekeeper, dressing in a colorful outfit I preferred, and our family settled into a comfortable routine. As Rachel's pregnancy progressed, she found it difficult to keep up with everything, especially as her energy waned. I noticed the familiar tension in my eyes, which was a sign that I was feeling the strain. She decided it was time to propose a creative solution. One day, Rachel pulled Kathy. "Would you be willing to help Arthur out a bit more directly?" she asked, her eyes twinkling. Kathy's face lit up, but Rachel advised her to run it by me first. I was torn. I loved Rachel deeply and felt guilty even considering her suggestion, but seeing her struggles with pregnancy pains and fatigue weighed on me in the end. We talked it over with honesty, and she assured me she trusted me completely. I agreed to the arrangement, though I made her promise she'd never feel unloved or neglected in her 7th month of pregnancy. Rose came to us in tears, had just gone through a really rough breakup. Her boyfriend, who was an FBI agent, had betrayed her trust by using her personal life against her professionally. Rose was heartbroken, and I'd never seen her so vulnerable. Rachel knew exactly what to do. She reached out to Fiona, who promptly took legal action. Rachel hired Rose to lead our new corporate security department, giving her both purpose and stability. Rose moved in with us, and while she initially seemed awkward around me, she eventually opened up about her insecurities, confessing. I reassured her that she was worthy of me, and as time went on, our friendship grew stronger. 8 months into Rachel's pregnancy, I hadn't experienced true intimacy with her for several months, and I could tell she felt guilty. She brought it up to Rose, suggesting that perhaps she could offer me the emotional connection I'd been missing at first, was a bit hesitant, and worried about the impact on Rachel and our marriage. But Rachel's trust and confidence reassured her after much discussion. I finally agreed, as having Rose back in my life in this way felt both familiar and comforting, and her presence brought a renewed sense of balance to our household. I noticed how she slowly embraced brighter colors, and even started wearing dresses around the house, which seemed to lift her spirits. A year later, I was caught in a whirlwind of emotions. My life felt out of control, exhilarating yet overwhelming. Rachel's love and my inner turmoil made me feel like I was just a passenger in my own life, unable to regain control. The part of me I jokingly called the critter adored Rachel, but at times I felt I needed someone else to talk to, someone who could help me through this chaos. I wasn't comfortable sharing these feelings with others, so I decided to write. When I was with my kids, I felt more at peace. I planned to use that clarity to understand what I wanted from life. Meanwhile, across town, Elizabeth, a psychiatrist and aspiring romance author, was preparing to meet a new client. She was deep into her latest novel when her secretary, Julie, buzzed in to announce her to. Elizabeth put down her manuscript, bracing herself for what she suspected might be a complicated session. When I entered with Mia in my arms, Elizabeth was visibly taken aback. She looked at us as if she'd never seen a man with his child before, trying to remain professional. She introduced herself as Dr. Jones, though I noticed a hint of warmth in her eyes as she said, "Please call me Arthur." I said, "I've been struggling with something unusual. I'm not sure if I have a split personality, but I've kept a journal documenting my experiences. If you could read through it, I'd appreciate your advice, but I'd like to charge you for your time. Maybe we could meet again next week?" She looked at me with so much empathy I felt an immediate sense of relief. "Of course, Arthur," she replied. "I'll read it carefully, and we'll meet at the same time next week." Over the following week, Elizabeth read my journal multiple times, studying not only my words but the photos I included. One photo in particular seemed to capture her attention, a family Christmas card. It showed me surrounded by 4 women and our children. Rachel sat to my right, visibly pregnant, while Kathy, wearing her maid's uniform, sat on the floor with. The kids. Rose was holding me on her lap. She had a kind and soft face. Elizabeth was amazed by what she saw in the photo. She kept looking at it, comparing herself to the women in it. She wondered how I ended up with a family so unconventional. When I came back the next week with Mia, Elizabeth started when we were talking about the critter I'd written about. She said it sounded like a protective instinct, something that might have developed as a coping mechanism during my years in foster care. "Maybe it's not something to fear, Arthur. It sounds like a part of you that's always tried to protect you in challenging times. Have you thought about that?" I thought about giving it a different name, something less ominous. I smiled at the idea. "What about Billy? I don't think anyone's ever been scared of a Billy." Elizabeth laughed, a sound that seemed to light up the room. "Billy sounds perfect. Who could fear Billy?" As we continued talking, I noticed Elizabeth's face softened and she held my gaze with a warmth I wasn't used to. We chatted more about my life, my family, and my new role. Rachel had decided that my skills were best used as a board member and special assistant, which meant I could leave the intense hours of my former position behind. The arrangement meant I had more time. I told Elizabeth about my family, and she seemed happy about it. The next week, I went to her office with a different concern. Rachel was pregnant again, and suggested that I bring another woman into our household. Rose and Kathy were also expecting, and Rachel was concerned that I'd be left unattended. I had this feeling that things were getting out of control. It's ridiculous, Elizabeth. I know Rachel loves me, but it feels like we're crossing every boundary. Society sets the rules. Elizabeth, take my hand and give me a reassuring look. Arthur, I understand you're feeling overwhelmed. Would you let me talk? I think we can work something out. I was a bit nervous about the idea of Elizabeth meeting Rachel, but I trusted her judgment. Please, Elizabeth, don't ruin things for me. Rachel's the best thing that's ever happened to me. The next day, with my permission, Elizabeth met Rachel at our home. They spent hours discussing my concerns. By the end, Rachel seemed to understand that while we loved our unconventional life, it was pushing me beyond my comfort zone. Elizabeth suggested that I start attending therapy sessions more regularly, even daily, to help manage the complexities of our family dynamics. Then, to my surprise, Elizabeth. I looked at Rachel and asked quietly, Rachel, I hope I'm not overstepping, but would it be all right if I became part of this family as well? Arthur is someone I deeply respect and I'd like to support him however I can. Rachel smiled and gave me her approval. I think Arthur would be delighted the following Christmas. Our family sent out a holiday card with Elizabeth on it. Now, the card showed Rachel, Rose, Kathy, and Elizabeth, with each of them either holding a child or visibly pregnant. We looked like an unusual family, but everyone wore radiant smiles one evening as we were preparing for bed. I asked Rachel, Honey, I noticed that judge. Wallace has been dropping by pretty often. Should I be worried? Rachel chuckled. No, Arthur, there's no trouble. She's just interested in making sure we're all well taken care of. Besides, she's always had her eye on you. She winked, and I couldn't help but laugh, feeling grateful for the happiness and stability we'd found together. As time went on, I felt truly at peace. My family, which had been fractured, was now whole and brimming with love and support. I had found my place in this vibrant, unconventional household. Surrounded by strong, caring women and wonderful children, I finally felt like the luckiest man alive.